Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our free webinar session presented by InsightWorks. Today's topic is about how to simplify product configuration in Business Central. We estimate that today's webinar will take up about 45 minutes of your time, including some time at the end for a Q&A. Our webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand after the live session. All attendees will receive a follow-up email after the webinar is complete with a link to access the presentation. In the chat, you can find links to our social media, website, as well as a link to our Calendly, where you can schedule a 30-minute meeting with one of our experts at Sabre to discuss any questions you might have. With that being said, I'd like everybody to submit questions through the question panel or chat during the session, or wait until the end for a Q&A. Please remember to stay muted during the session unless otherwise prompted. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Mark Hamblin, Solution Advisor of InsightWorks.
Hi, good morning or afternoon, everyone. And as Gemma mentioned there, we're going to go through and talk a little bit about how you can make your life easier with the product configurator within Business Central. And, as discussed, ask any questions you like as we go through. And if you have any questions, I've got some contact information for Sabre at the end as well. All right, so what we're going to do today is just go through a very quick PowerPoint, and then we'll jump into a demo of the software to show you what's possible. But to start, I thought I'd just sort of introduce InsightWorks to you. You obviously know Sabre already, but if you don't know InsightWorks, we've been around for about 10 years now, and we work, primarily in the manufacturing and distribution industries, and we've got some retail capabilities and things like that now as well. But we're, quite well known out there, and we work in a lot of areas, a lot of different countries. We, again, mostly manufacturing and distribution. I'm not going to go through all the stats here, but there's a lot. And we've got a lot of products. So all these guys over here on the right, that's, a selection of the solutions that we have for Business Central. If you have any questions on any of those, you can talk to your Sabre rep. We work with them to implement all of those products. Now, in addition to sort of all of these guys, we have a number of free solutions available as well for Business Central. Most of these are available for Business Central SaaS. Some are available on-prem, but most of these are meant for cloud. And I'll just touch on a couple of these because they do work with the configurator as well, right? So they all sort of play together nicely. So the two up at the top here, this enhanced planning worksheet, if you're doing manufacturing and you've sort of configured products to manufacture or assemble, then the enhanced planning worksheet is going to help you plan the production of those products. So it's like the standard planning worksheet in Business Central, just better. It's enhanced, right? Not given the name. So that one is free. You can install that from AppSource and start using it immediately. And also the forecasting worksheet. So if you want to do sales forecasting based on your history, you can use that, and you can do, using the Azure AI forecasting model that Microsoft has put out, you can actually do your sales forecasting as well. And then some other tools, the green ones are more the power user tools, things like that, you probably have implemented already if you're working with Sabre, things like cloud printing and, barcode generation, things like that. And down at the bottom, some additional tools that you can use, like being able to schedule your production. So you've configured a product, you need to produce it now, you can use the graphical scheduler to schedule that. Drag and drop document management. So you want to drop a customer's PO or their email right into Business Central and store it on SharePoint and maybe access it from the shop floor or whatever. That's Doc Extender. And then these last two are shipping and warehouse management. So if you're doing sort of domestic parcel shipments, Ordership Express is free. It'll work with Canada Post, Purelator, UPS, FedEx, whatever you want, and you can generate your shipping labels from Business Central, get the tracking information, costs, all that kind of stuff. And WMS Express, if you want to add barcoding to Business Central, again, completely free. There's no reason to pay for a warehouse management solution if you need that core capability of being able to receive or pick and ship or do your inventory counts or do your bin movements. You can do all that from this Express version. So all of these guys are free. You can install them. There's no registration or anything required. If you have questions, again, chat with your Sabre rep. They'll be able to help you out with them. All right. Now for that, let's talk about the configurator. So there's lots of configurators available. Why would you, sort of watch this webinar or consider this one? Well, a couple of the key things are the first 2 points. It's built right into Business Central. So it's not an external app that you need to integrate and, move data back and forth. It's right in Business Central. So it works in the environment that you're used to. And configurators are always hard to get up and running, right? There's lots of things you have to, put into the system to make sure they work the way you want them to work. With ours, it's actually probably the easiest one to get up and running and working, whether you use the advanced rules or just the basic configuration capabilities. It's very simple to set up and use. So that helps a lot, right? You're going from a very large number of hours to a much more manageable number of hours to get that configuration going. Another capability, which we'll talk about more in the demo, is the fact that it doesn't have to create new items. If you're quoting items, we can create that configuration, create the bill of materials, routing, whatever you need automatically, but we don't have to create a new item number. We can then convert that quoting item into a new item when you sell it, or we can just leave it as sort of a generic item number where if you're doing thousands of configurations, you don't have to create thousands of different items within your system to manage those. We work with both production and assembly BOMs, and we can also create routings as well. So not only do we manage the bill of materials, we can also manage, which work centers are required, what the time is required on each work center based on options you've chosen. All of those sorts of things are managed from within the configurator. And then again, there's rule builder. You can create formal rules, you can write code, all sorts of things to put your custom business logic in there. And don't have to write code. There's an API and there's tools for creating very comprehensive business logic in there. But the rule builder is really just a nice GUI user interface. You can go in and you can define your own business logic to drive that configurator. All right. So a few different things there that help you out. Now, with that, let's actually just jump in and see what this thing looks like. So I'm going to jump into Business Central here, and I'm going to start with a sales order. It works with sales quotes or sales orders. But if we jump into a sales order here, I'm just going to start a new one. Now, this is typically where you're going to start using the configurators is from the sales order. You don't have to. So if you've got an engineering department and they want to create items based on configurations like pre-create items and things like that, you can jump into what we call the BOM designer without having a sales order or a sales quote. But typically, we're going to come in here and start with a sales order or a sales quote. So I'm just going to quickly create my sales order here. And down now that we've got our sales order, down in the lines, I'm going to build up that configuration. And the way I do that is I come in, and on the configurator menu, I've got a few different options here. So the BOM designer is where I'm creating one, item at a time. I'm going to go in and configure a specific item. The bulk configurator is if a customer is ordering, multiple versions of the same product. Maybe they're buying desks and they want to buy 5 different, styles of desk. I'm going to configure that. I can do that more in a spreadsheet view here. And then we've got this design with AI, which allows you to just describe the product you want and it'll build it out for you. All right, so we're going to start, the simplest way with the BOM designer. And we've got a customer that's come in and, they want to buy, a desk from us or a PC. They're setting up their home office. So they're going to buy a desk and a PC from us. So let's go in here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the type of product that we need to configure. So the idea behind the configurator is it works best when you have sort of a base product line and you want to be able to add options and various configurations to it. So for example, I've got a desk here that I might want to change the length on or change various attributes of it, or, I've got a valve, right? I want to change attributes of that valve or those sorts of things where you have a certain base product that you can add or remove options from. And in this case, like I said, we're going to start with this desk here because we're going to build this out. And when I choose that product line, so on a website, typically this is, your line card, if you will. If you've got a website and you've got a, page for each product, well, that's effectively what this is. This represents that page, right? If this is IKEA, they've got, 5 different types of desk that are all unpronounceable, but 5 different types of desk. So I would see those 5 different styles of desk. And then for each desk, I could choose the various options for it. Okay, so in this case, I've got a few things here. I've got length and finish. It defaults a couple of values in, but I can come in here. I can change the length. I can come in. I can change the finish here. And as I'm doing this, it can change the pricing for me and everything else. Now, the pricing that comes in down here at the bottom, right? This is my total cost so far. This is what I'm planning on charging the customer. So far, I'm not doing so well. It looks at your component costs, the pricing that you've either set up within Business Central or within the configurator. It's looking at all those things. It's looking at the labor associated with, building this desk, all that kind of stuff to come up with that cost and the price. And I can, if I really want it, come in here and modify this price on the fly, but we're just going to use the defaults. So at any rate, I've chosen those two things. And then down here, I've got some other options. I could choose, different types of doors and shelves and trim. And one of the nice things about the configurator is you can create almost any formula you like. So almost anything that you can do in Excel, you can do within the configurator. So things like, if statements or whatever formulas you want to use that reference all the values that I've entered, we can do formulas. So this trim here, this 21, is being calculated based on the length that I've specified. So as I change the length, we can see that trim increase there. And now I chose a massive desk there, 21 feet long. And what it did, as soon as I did that, it put these shelves in there automatically and calculated out the quantity. So I have a rule that says, hey, if my desk is longer than 10 feet, we're going to enforce the need for these shelves and we're going to calculate out the quantity for them. So you can put rules like that in where based on certain selections or values I've entered, we can either enforce other selections or hide those selections or default them in or whatever you like to do. And I did this without prompting the end user, but we can prompt them as well. I'll show you another example later that shows that. And I can do things like, I've got this custom option where I can, come in and just enter a custom text that describes what kind of door I want on this if I want it. And I've also got this ability to select from additional choices, where I'll show you that actually in sort of a more obvious way in a second. But I can come in here and I can add in all of these different things. And again, it's calculated out my cost and my price for this. And now I'm good to go. And when I hit OK, what it's going to do is it's going to go out. It's going to build out the bill of materials for me. It's using this, what we call a quoting item. So it didn't create a new item for me on this particular thing. It's used this quoting item. I can convert this to a normal item number if I want. But again, if I'm quoting, hundreds of these things all the time, I don't want to create hundreds of new item numbers just to do a quote or whatever. So it's created this configuration ID I made visible just for this demo. Normally that's hidden, but that indicates, the ID of this particular configuration. If I went in and created a new configuration that's exactly the same, it would actually use the same configuration ID. So even if I'm creating new item numbers, it won't create two of the same item. It'll find an existing item that matches the configuration I just described, and it's going to go in and use that existing item. So it's come in, it's put in all the details, so I just enter the quantity I want for that. And I believe this one I've set up as an assembly order item. So it comes in, and you can see the bill of materials for this particular assembly order has broken it out into all the panels I need, and it's calculated the quantities of all the panel and everything else, and it's put some instructions in there and all sorts of things. This is all configurable. So you decide how this is all going to look in your bill of materials, where those comments show up, and all those sorts of things. So this particular one is an assembly order item, right? It's an assembled order. In this case, it was actually assembled to stock. But we're doing an assembly, right, to produce that particular item. We can also do the production orders. Now, I've got my desk on, and the description here that it generated, again, that's based on your rules. The comments that it puts underneath that, also based on your rules. You can change the description that shows up here or decide what description shows up and what doesn't. So, for example, I just put the finish and the number of shells. I didn't list the types of legs or anything like that, in the description, but you certainly could if you wanted, right, in these comments. All right, so now we've got our desk. Now we need something to put on the desk. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to put a PC. We're going to build a computer for this particular desk. So we're going to go in and we're going to go into the BOM designer here. And now I'm going to, bring in that the Office desktop PC here. So we're going to bring that in. And again, if you're going, for example, on the Dell website and you look at a desktop PC, they're going to have, we got the this line and this line and this line. Well, it's the same thing. I choose one of those lines in here, one of the types of products I'm going to configure, And then I can come in and specify all of this stuff. So again, we've defaulted in one of these items, and this one doesn't have anything grouped, but now I can simply come in and choose this. By the way, this is all the old Microsoft demo data. You can see how old it is. I don't think anybody is buying a new computer with these kinds of specs, but anyway, there we go. We'll choose the fastest one that's available to us with this massive amount of RAM. We're going to do 512 meg of RAM in that thing. It's going to be crazy fast. And then we're going to choose all of our different options. You can see it gives us on hand here. And if you do the show details, you can also get in and see fact boxes around, the details on each of those components. So we're going to come in here, bring all that in. And here on the monitor, I've got these various monitors available. These are my standard ones that I normally include in this package or normally sell. But maybe the customer comes in and says, I want, nice big, 40-inch screen or something like that for this. Well, I don't have that as a standard option, but what I can do, I've enabled to select from additional choices. And when I select that, what it does is it brings up my, vendor catalog items. And now this is my vendor list, like what I can actually get from my supplier. And it's going to come in and list all of the different, in this case, monitors and things like that I could select from and add to that configuration. So even though I don't stock these items, I could come in here, choose one of them, and add it to this configuration. So you do have that ability to extend the configuration beyond what you've set up by default with those additional choices. And as we saw in the desk, if I just had one here that says other or something like that, I could simply come in here and type in a description of what they want, manually set the price for it and those sorts of things to include that in my configuration. Now, down here, when I choose the mouse, you can see I've got three choices here. I've got basic, advanced, and IntelliMouse, and I can select one of those. But on the keyboard, I've got, fancy keyboard or just a quiet key and the performance keyboard. If I come in and I choose an alternate keyboard, now you can see I can't choose that basic mouse anymore. We've eliminated that choice from the user because it doesn't work with this performance keyboard. Or we figure if they're going high-end keyboard, why give them the option of the basic mouse? So you can do all sorts of things like that where you can, limit the number of choices they have available, even limit the options that are available based on prior selections and those sorts of things. So I'm going to come in here, and that's going to be my computer that I'm configuring, and hit OK. And again, it adds it onto the sales order with the price and the cost. And this one I've exploded out all of the components that'll show up on your your Business Central quote document or sales order document. And again, this one's assembled order, so we've got an assembly order that it's created, and it's just throwing this. And this labor time that we've got here for assembly, again, the number of hours that are coming in here for this can be based on the choices I've made. So we can calculate how much time is actually required to assemble this PC versus some other PC, or based on the choices we've made. Okay, so there's a couple of simple ones. These are very basic, right? We've got a very flat bill of materials, but very quick and easy to come and configure this. You'll notice this one did actually create an item number, right? Or it used an existing item number if I've built this same PC before. So if I'd configured something that I'd already built once before, it would load up that previous item number. It wouldn't create a new one that's sort of a duplicate of the original. Now, the advantage of using the item number is I can also do smart item numbers. So if I wanted to create that item number that references, any of the components in there or something like that, I can do that. So if you do use sort of the calculated or smart item numbers, we have tools that allow you to set that up. Otherwise, I've just got this sequential one, and it'll just create a new item number for every new configuration that I define. And again, the advantage of this is now I can just copy this and paste it as a new line, or copy it from one document to another, those sorts of things. All right, now we've got our desk, we've got our computer, and that means we're going to be sitting at the desk all day. We better do something to get some exercise, instead of just sitting at my fancy new desk and PC. So we're going to go in there, and luckily our store also sells bikes. So we're going to come in here, and here I've got a couple of different bike options here. I'm just going to choose this one, and now we're going to configure, the typical ERP example where we're going to build a bicycle. And on this one, you can see we didn't default anything in. So when it's red and bold, it means, it's mandatory and we haven't selected it. So I can now come in here and start choosing the choices for each of these options. So I'm going to do, the red frame. I'm going to do, standard handlebars. Oh, and when I choose those handlebars, look at what happens. It says, hey, you need a bell if you're going to choose these handlebars. And what it did was it dropped that bell here in, and it set the quantity of the bell to 2, right? And that, just for fun, I made it, you need 2 bells for every handlebar that you buy. So the calculation is, the quantity of bells is double what the number of handlebars we have. So yeah, there I prompted the user, just like on the other example where we just forced in the shelves. This time I forced in the bell, but I gave the user a prompt to tell them that something's happening. If I chose the other handlebars, and you'll notice I've only got the bell and the mud guards here for options. If I choose the other handlebars, it gives me the option now. Instead of enforcing, it says, hey, let's upsell this guy and sell him a light. We can sell him a light for it. And if I say yes, you'll notice now I have this light option. That light option disappeared when I chose the other handlebars because I guess I can't fit a light if I have 2 bells or something like that. But again, that's where we're, just like on the mouse where I hit that specific choice from the dropdown, I can actually hide that entire option if I want based on prior selections. All right, and I'm just going to go through here and add in, some of the additional things that we have available for this bike, and we're good. And you'll notice it's building up a picture of that product. So you can set that up if you've got those images based on what you selected. It can update the image. So we've got the red frame, we've got the different handlebars. You can change whatever you want, and this picture goes along with the item. And you can have that showing up on the quote, right? You'd have to modify the quote document that comes out of Business Central. You can actually show a picture of that on the quote or the sales order or whatever you like. So if you want to go to that extent, you can build up whatever pictures you want within the configurator. And then the last one here, I will choose the mud guards. And we have 2 options here. We can just do the back or we can do the front and back. I'm going to choose the front and back mud guards, and we're good to go. We've got our price and we've got our cost. Well, we weren't making much money on the desk, but we're sure making it up here on the bike. All right, so that's my configuration. I hit OK. It's going to go up. It's going to build this. This one is set up to build an item number or to find an existing item. So you'll notice this one did actually build a new item, but if I'd configured something that matched a previous configuration, it would have just chosen that instead of creating a new item for me. And again, this could be a smart item number where, it actually shows you the details within the item number. And same thing here, I've decided what I want to show in the comments, and I've defined what I want that description to look like and those sorts of things. Now, the difference on this one is this is not an assembled order or an assembly order configuration. This actually created a production bill of materials and a production routing. So if I go back into that configurator just for a sec here, I can come in and I can look at that item structure and see exactly what it built, right? So I entered whatever it was, 7 or 8 choices there, and it's built out this bill of materials for me and the routing as well, right? So it's brought in all the labor and everything I need to manufacture this product. So it's created the BOM, it's created the routing, and again, that routing, the time on each of those operations can be calculated within the configurator based on the things I've chosen. So for example, when I choose, front and rear mud guards, maybe that adds an extra half an hour over not choosing any mud guards, or maybe it adds an extra quarter of an hour versus just choosing the back mud guard, right? So we can do all those sorts of things. And speaking of the mud guards, you'll notice, I chose just the one option. I said front and back, and it automatically went in and added in the required components for both the front and the back. So a single choice resulted in multiple things being added into that bill of materials. So from an end user perspective, it's pretty darn simple, right? I go into the configurator there, the BOM designer, I list my options, I get my item, I get my price, I get all of this stuff on there, and I'm ready to go. Okay, pretty simple. Now, just as an aside, that bulk configurator that I mentioned here, that allows you to go in. So if I'm selling multiple desks, I can come in here and maybe they want 2 6-foot maple and they want another 2 8-foot birch that has, glass doors, and we're going to do 2 glass doors, and this one's going to have trim. It's more of a spreadsheet view where I can configure multiple versions of that product in one, and that just automatically goes in, builds those up, and adds those into the sales order for me automatically. Okay, so the bulk configurator can do that. And then, the design with AI portion, what that allows you to do, if you've got it set up, I can come in and just describe the type of item I want, and it's going to build it for me. So if I come in here, and I haven't done this in a while, so hopefully my AI stuff is still connected, but I can come in and I'm just going to use voice actually. Give it a sec here. Oh, let's give another sec. The voice is just initializing. No, it doesn't want to use my voice. Darn it, now I have to type. Who wants to type? Nobody wants to type. Let's see if it initializes. All right, so red mountain bike with rear mud guard. Oops, gotta spell it right. This is why I don't like typing. Rear mud guard. Oops. And aluminum handlebars, stuff like that, right? So you'd go in, and normally I say all that, and it just comes in there. When I do that, what it's going to do is it's going to go out and it's going to go in and figure this out. So let's just do, let's get rid of the mud guard because it's saying I don't have available mud guards for it. So we'll go in and it's going to prompt me, right? And it's put in the things that I asked for, right? And I said yes to the thing. So if I described all of the different things I wanted, just based on that description, it would have built out my configuration. I hit OK, and I'm good to go. So where that's going in the future is on your website. Instead of, searching for the different things that you want, what you would do is you would just, type in the description of what you're looking for. It'll build up that configuration and give you your price right there, right? So that's not available on websites yet, but that is on its way. So that describe to configure is pretty handy right within Business Central, but in the long run, that's going to be great for customers going in there and doing it. All right. So anyway, that's kind of how the configurator works, right? Simply come in, you choose an existing configured item or a blank line, do the BOM designer, come in, configure what you want, gives you your price and your cost, possibly a picture on there, all those sorts of things, adds it to the sales order, and you're good to go. Very simple. Now, in order to make all of that magic work, there's a little bit of configuration involved. So I'm going to briefly show you some of that configuration because, as I mentioned during the PowerPoint, configurators can be tough, right? You need to, get a hold of them. So we offer a trial version with ours. You need to get a hold of them, look at them, and figure out how much effort is it actually going to take to make this thing work in your environment. And as I mentioned as well, is ours is pretty simple to get going. So let's actually look at how you set up the configurator. And again, everything is done right within Business Central. There's no separate user interface or database or anything you need to manage. It's all here. So this is a list of sort of all the product lines that I can configure. So I've got everything from bathrooms to chairs and the mountain bikes and all those kinds of things in here for configuration. And for each of these, let's grab the mountain bike for fun. I can indicate whether we want to use that quoting item capability where it doesn't create a new item for me unless I explicitly tell it to, or if I have a setting that says, we're going to use a quoting item on the sales quote, but when I convert that sales quote to a sales order, it'll turn it into a regular item. And then that regular item, can be set up to have a smart item number or just use a number series. And the smart item number, you can come in and you can build up your configuration based on all the different choices and options and all those sorts of things. So you can come in and really build up a comprehensive rule here to define what you want your item numbers to look like based on the choices people have made in the configurator. So if you use smart item numbers, we can manage that, no problem. Otherwise, we've got a few things, the data template, like basically all the defaults on that on that item when we build it, like is it going to be assembly or production or all those different things, right? So just to bring this up, it's going to set all of this stuff by default when we create that configured item, plus all of our bill of material and routing stuff as well. And then we've got a base routing here. So that says this is the standard routing we start with to build a bike. And then we've got some choices we can make within the configurator. So pretty straightforward. And again, you can come in here and define how you want your description to look and all sorts of things like that. And away we go. Now, the meat of it, though, I mean, this is very simple, but the meat of it is really when we set up the actual options. So what you see here is how we configure what the end user sees when they come in. So something like this base bill of materials, this is the bill of materials that has everything in it that's not configurable. So if I'm building some electrical enclosure, well, there's a whole bunch of stuff, screws, nuts, bolts, case, whatever, all those sorts of things that I don't want people to configure, but they're part of that overall build. Well, I'll include that here. So in the case of the mountain bike, this is going to be, again, chain and sprockets and cables and all sorts of stuff that we need to build that bike that we're not going to configure. Down here, and again, this is hidden, the end user doesn't see this, but it gets included in that build. Down here are all the different options that I have for that particular mountain bike. And down here are the choices for each option. So these choices, most of these are just going to be items, right? They're components I can select, but they don't have to be. They can be production BOMs. So if I want to have a choice that incorporates 50 different components, I can include a production BOM on there. And that could be user selectable or not. So I'll show you that in a sec, where I could list a whole bunch of stuff here that isn't user selectable, but gets included in the bill of material based on other selections. Okay, I can do resource. So you saw that on the PC where that can incorporate labor into your assembly orders. I can also do operations, which is labor for production orders. So I can incorporate, either selectable, like maybe I want to have an option that says something is drillable or punched or something like that, right? So I can have them choose an operation for drilling or an operation for punching if I want it. Or I don't show them the operation, I just have two choices that say, or one thing that says, how do you want the holes made? And I could have, drilling and punching as text, which is the next one down, and that automatically includes that operation. Okay, but we can add all of these things into the routing. And down here is the sub configuration, which allows me to do multi-level configurations. So, let's say on this mountain bike, I've got the main thing, but maybe the wheels, I have a whole bunch of additional configuration options per wheel, like, maybe the type of spoke I'm using or the rim, all those sorts of things that I might want to configure. Well, that could be a sub configuration, which then drills down into the specific wheel configuration that's independent of the rest of this, right? So we can do that multi-level configuration. You can go as many levels deep as you like with those sub configurations. All right, so there's a bunch of stuff you can set up, but the basics are typically, I've got my option here, I've got the choices for the option, and there's a lot you can do on the choices. So for example, you can set all your production stuff like routing link codes, all that sort of thing. You can determine whether you want this to show up in the comments, like on the sales line, which is the extended text. You can set your pricing and stuff here. So here it's set to manually. What that means is I'm using the pricing configured within the configurator. If I set this to when used, it's going to use the Business Central pricing set on the item itself. Okay, same thing with costing. I can set a default cost, or I can bring in the cost from that item when I use it. Okay, and then you can set images and all sorts of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can set per choice if you really want to get into it. But the basics are, I simply come in, here's my frame, these are my two options for the frame, and I really don't have to worry about most of the rest of this. It's just done. Okay. If we get a little more advanced down here on the mud guards, you can see we've got a few different things. When we built this bike in the sales order, the only thing the end user saw were these two options, back, front and back, these two things here. And what happens is when I choose front and back, that is the parent choice code for these guys here. So anything that says, front and back is the parent, it's going to automatically include those in the BOM. So when I say front and back, it's going to include the front mudguard, the back mudguard, and it's going to include this additional labor time to install those mudguards. Okay, so just by choosing that, we've incorporated two things in the BOM and one thing in the routing. And this formula here, this works on labor and material and everything else. But again, you can define whatever you want in here. You can have if statements. You can say, I want bell times 2 or whatever. And what that would do, this bell, that's the variable. It's going to take whatever the bell quantity is and multiply it by 2, and that's going to be, the number of hours it takes me to install the mudguards. Probably wouldn't want to do that, but you can write all those types of formulas in here. Again, mins, maxes, rounding, trigonomic functions, if statements, whatever you want to stick in those formulas. Okay. Now I'll show you one last thing, which is a little more advanced. You remember when I chose those handlebars, it did one of a couple of things. It either prompted me to add a light, or it hid the light completely and forced me to have a bell. And the way we define that is with the rule builder. And the rule builder, what that does, it takes a sec to get used to, but this says, match all. So it's basically anding it. It's saying, hey, if the handlebar choice, so these are all your different, sort of options within the configurator. You can look at the choice, you can look at the quantity, you can look at the variant code, all that kind of stuff in here. And we're saying if the handlebar choice is equal to, and you can do all sorts of things here, 1800, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide that light completely. So I'm going to hide that option. They're not even going to be able to see it to select it. Okay. And then I'm also going to check to see, hey, if they haven't selected a bell yet, I'm going to yell at the user. I'm going to ask them, hey, or, tell them, hey, you need a bell. So first of all, I send a message to the user, and then I force that bell choice in there. So I force the bell. So it's as simple as that. You can build these up, and what that actually looks like. You can also write it as code, but it's just saying, hey, if the handlebar choice is 1800 and the bell choice is blank, or the bell quantity doesn't equal this formula, then we're going to do all of those actions that are defined here. Right? And the other rule I've got here, this one says, hey, if I've chosen the 1801 handlebars, we're going to prompt the user to say, hey, do you want to add a light? And if they say yes, we're going to basically go in and add that light in, the default light choice. Pretty simple. Okay, so again, you can build these rules within the rule builder here, and you can get as complicated as you want, or you can actually write script to build out that business logic if you prefer. So you can write code like that if statement I showed you to sort of do the same type of logic, all right, using the API that's defined in the system. All right, so that's basically it. It doesn't take a lot to set this up, right? So again, all you've got is your options and your choices. If you lay this all out in Excel, you can actually import most of this directly from like an Excel sheet if you've got the data in the right format. So what that would look like, configurator choices. Let's just bring that in. This is sort of the raw data that's in the configurator. We've got our type of product, the item category code, we've got the option, and then we've got all the choices for that particular option. So this is, if you had this in Excel, right? So the type of product, the option, and then the choices for the option, and the default quantity and whatever else you want to put in there, you can import that and you're ready to go with the configurator. So again, it is quite simple to set up and get working. Where it gets tricky is with those rules and any of that business logic you want to implement to prevent people from trying to build something that's not possible to physically manufacture. But again, pretty simple to get up and running, and away you go. All right, that's pretty much all I wanted to go through on the demo. So let's just jump into the PowerPoint and talk a little bit about what it would cost you to do. So one of the other advantages of this configurator is it's probably about 10% of the cost of something, that can do the equivalent types of things, right? So it is actually quite reasonably priced as far as configurators go. And there's no user limits. It's licensed per company. So you get one license and anybody in the organization can use it. It does work with any Business Central license that you have out there. And this one, the team member license, can be used for quoting. So if you have users that are just doing quoting, they can use the configurator to build up those quotes, with that cheap team member license if you want. To actually create the sales order and things like that, you need the full Business Central license. But if you just have people doing quoting, they can use the team member. And then as far as implementation goes, the way it works is, we train you on how to use the configurator, and we'll help support you. We're not going to build the configurations for you. We're going to empower you to do that yourself. We're going to give you the training and support you need to do it. So the fixed price implementation is really just, helping you get trained up on how to use it so you can get going. And check with Sabre on any of the pricing and things like that. They'd be happy to help you get that sorted out. All right. With that, if you need more information, you can go to our website, go to CPQ for Dynamics to find us, or go to Sabre or check with your Sabre rep, and they'd be happy to help you out. All right. With that, let's see. Are there any questions that we have to answer?
Thank you so much, Mark. Yeah, we had a couple questions come in here. One of them is, how does it help reduce errors in sales or production planning?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one of the key things, right? So number one, the configurator is going to simplify order entry because I don't have to go searching through thousands of item numbers. I just enter exactly what the customer's asked for as the, and it builds out the BOM and everything else. So really what that's going to do is now I've got a formal way of making sure we've got the right components and everything else to reduce those errors in the production planning, like the purchase planning and everything else, and how we get it through the shop floor. So we've built up those rules up front so that there's really no confusion or potential for error when people are building out those configured products.
Awesome. I have another question here for you. Are there any limitations in working across multiple companies or manufacturing locations?
No, not really. So, I mean, the way Business Central works, of course, is each company is sort of its own little entity. So you can use a configurator in multiple companies simultaneously, not an issue. Now, the multi-location manufacturing, it depends on what you're trying to do. But I mean, you can set up the rules in the configurator to, choose alternate routings and things like that based on where you want to manufacture that item, or maybe you have certain rules like, maybe the desk, I chose a 20-foot or 21-foot desk there. Maybe plant A doesn't do desks that size. It only does 10-foot desks. So you could have a rule that says, hey, if I choose a desk that's longer, I'm actually going to force that to be manufactured in a different plant, right? By choosing the work centers and things like that in that alternate facility. So yes, you can set it up to help facilitate, multi-location manufacturing or, working in different companies as well.
That's great. And one more question here for you. How long does a typical implementation take, and who usually leads it? InsightWorks, partners, or internal teams?
Yeah, so probably all three of them. So the way it typically works is we'll get in and we'll train people up on how to use it. And that usually comes through InsightWorks. I mean, sometimes you do it, but typically the training and then sort of ongoing support will either go through Sabre or it may go through us, depending on what's required. But it's really the end customer that's going to go in and build out those configurations and sort of set up the rules and the components and everything the way they need to, right? They've got their experience with their products. They know what needs to be done. They're typically not going to have the partner or us do that work for them. They're going to have that internal expertise on the products. We're just going to train them on how that works.
All right, thank you so much. Are there any other questions that we have? It doesn't look like it. If that's all the questions for today, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this webinar. I'd also like to thank Mark again for presenting for us today. Once again, you can find our social media, our website, and a link to our Calendly to schedule a 30-minute meeting with one of our experts at Sabre. I hope you all have a great day, and we hope to see you again at one of our upcoming webinars.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.